Welcome to Ink and Evidence, where silence tells stories, and every clue brings us closer to the truth. From chilling crime cases to unsolved mysteries and secrets the world tried to forget, we uncover what lies beneath. If you dare to question, if you seek the truth, then you're exactly where you need to be. Tell us where you're watching this video from. Your feedback always inspires us. Stay tuned to solve the mystery, because the truth always leaves a trace.
Let's begin today's story. Murder at Kingsford Manor. Chapter 1. The Question Beneath the Clock Tower. Snow fell upon Ravenshade, as though the sky were gently emptying its memory. By midnight, every rooftop wore a white hush. Every narrow lane lay softened beneath the pale glow of gas lamps, and the old clock tower stood at the center of town like a solemn guardian, its face lit silver by the moon. It had not chimed in 23 years. And yet on that winter night at precisely 12 minutes past 1, it struck once. Inspector Elias Vey heard it from his room above the apothecary. The sound was low, wounded, and impossibly clear. One single note rolled through the sleeping town, trembling against windows, stirring ashes in fireplaces, and waking every guilty heart that had something to remember. By morning, a man was found beneath the clock tower. His name was Arthur Bellamy, keeper of the town records, a quiet gentleman with careful gloves, a silver cane, and no known enemies. He lay on the snow with his eyes open to the clock face above him. In his right hand was a torn scrap of parchment. Upon it, written in dark ink, were 5 words. "Ask what the clock remembers." Inspector Vey arrived as the first pale light touched the tower stones. He was not a tall man, nor an imposing one, but he possessed a stillness that made others lower their voices. He stood beside the body, listening not to the crowd, but to the silence between their whispers. Arthur's coat was dry beneath the shoulders. His boots held no snow in the seams. Most curious of all, the clock tower door was locked from the inside. "An accident," murmured Constable Rusk. Vey looked up at the unmoving hands of the clock. "No," he said softly, "an invitation." By noon, the suspects had gathered in Bellamy's drawing room, where a fire burned low and amber light trembled over shelves of old ledgers. There was Mrs. Clara Bellamy, the widow, calm as frost on glass, her black dress without a crease. There was Dr. Marlowe, who had once courted her and still watched her with the sorrowful patience of a man waiting at a closed door. There was Edwin Pike, the clockmaker, whose father had maintained the tower before its silence began. And there was Miss Rosetta Vale, a teacher with ink-stained fingers, who claimed she had seen Arthur walking alone near the tower just after midnight. Inspector Vey sat near the fire with Arthur's scrap of parchment on his knee. "Mr. Bellamy was writing a history of Ravenshade," he said. "A private history, I believe, not of festivals and families, of sins." No one moved. Outside, the snow continued falling, touching the windows like soft fingertips. Mrs. Bellamy stirred her tea. "My husband collected stories, nothing more." "Stories," said Vey, "are often where truth hides until it is safe to come out." He turned to the clockmaker. "Mr. Pike, why did the tower cease to chime?" Edwin's face tightened. "After my father died, the mechanism was damaged. No one wished to repair it." "Because of the accident?" The clockmaker looked down. 23 years earlier, during the winter fair, a young woman named Elise Morven had vanished beneath the clock tower. Some said she ran away. Others whispered she had been meeting a lover. Her body was never found. The town buried the story beneath snow, then years, then polite silence. Arthur Bellamy, it seemed, had begun digging. That evening, Inspector Vey visited the clock tower. The key had been found in Arthur's pocket, yet the lock showed scratches from within. Inside, the air was colder than outside, with the smell of iron, dust, and old wood. Above him, the frozen gears hung in darkness like the bones of some enormous sleeping creature. On the floor, half hidden beneath a broken stair, Vey found a pearl button. He held it beneath his lamp. Not old, not Arthur's. At supper, he asked Mrs. Bellamy whether she owned a coat with pearl buttons. She smiled faintly. "Many women do, Inspector. But not many lose them inside a locked tower on the night their husband dies." Her hand paused above her glass. Dr. Marlowe rose slightly. "You cannot accuse her from a button." "I accuse no one," said Vey. "I merely listen." Later, Miss Vale came to him in the hallway, her voice barely above the crackle of the fire. "Arthur came to the school last week," she whispered. "He asked for old parish maps. He said the tower was built over something." "What something?" "A well," she said, "sealed after Elise vanished." At dawn, Vey ordered the tower floor opened. The workmen protested. The mayor objected. The town gathered in frightened silence as stones were lifted from beneath the clock mechanism. Below them lay a narrow shaft, black and breathless. From that darkness came the faint smell of lavender. They lowered a lantern. At the bottom was a small leather satchel, wrapped in oilcloth, preserved by cold and stone. Inside were letters tied with blue ribbon, a woman's locket, and a diary belonging to Elise Morven. Inspector Vey read by firelight as snow darkened the windows. Elise had loved Thomas Pike, the clockmaker's father, but she had also known a secret. Clara, then a young woman promised to Arthur Bellamy, had pushed Elise during an argument beneath the tower. Not in murder, perhaps, but in panic. Thomas had helped hide the truth. Arthur had discovered it years later after finding the diary in an old record chest. But the final entry was not accusation. It was a question. If love makes cowards of men, what does fear make of women? That night, Vey assembled them beneath the clock tower. The snow had stopped. The moon hung clear above Ravenshade, and every breath smoked in the still air. Mrs. Bellamy stood very straight. "My husband wished to expose me," she said before Vey spoke, "but I did not kill him." "No," said Vey gently. "You went to beg him, you lost your button, you left him alive." Her eyes glistened. Vey turned to Edwin Pike. The clockmaker's face had gone gray. "Arthur learned your father's part in the concealment," Vey said. "But more than that, he learned you had repaired the clock secretly. You arranged the chime to sound once, knowing it would draw Arthur beneath the tower. Then you struck him and locked the door from inside, escaping through the old well passage your father had shown you as a boy." Edwin closed his eyes. "My father died ashamed," he whispered. "Bellamy would have dragged him through the mud." "No," said Vey. "The dead are beyond mud. It is the living who fear stains." For a long moment, only the wind moved. Then from high above, the clock began to stir. One gear shifted, then another. Slowly, impossibly, the old tower breathed back into time. Its hands trembled, found their place, and began to move. At 2 in the morning, it chimed again. This time, 12 notes rang over Ravenshade, not loud, not triumphant, but deep and clean, washing through the streets where secrets had slept too long. Inspector Vey watched the townspeople lift their faces toward the sound. Beneath the clock tower, the question had finally been answered. And in the falling silence after the final chime, Ravenshade remembered. Chapter 2. Rain over Kingsford Manor. Rain had been falling over Kingsford Manor since dusk, not in anger, but with the patient sorrow of something old returning to be heard. It tapped upon the tall windows, ran in silver threads down the glass, and whispered through the ivy that clung to the west wall. Beyond the lawns, the black cedars swayed slowly, their branches bending beneath the weight of water and wind. Inside, the manor glowed with firelight, lamplight, and the fragile civility of a family gathered under one roof for reasons none of them trusted. Sir Edmund Kingsford had summoned them all. At 72, he was a thin, severe gentleman with white hair, a silver watch chain, and eyes that seemed to notice what others tried to hide. He sat at the head of the dining table that evening, barely touching his soup, while rain murmured behind the curtains. "To memory," he said, raising his glass. No one answered at once. His daughter, Lady Beatrice, watched him with a face pale as porcelain. His nephew, Julian, smiled too quickly. Miss Clara Vale, the governess who had remained in the house long after the children had grown, lowered her eyes. And Mr. Oswald Price, the family solicitor, folded his napkin with delicate care. Only Detective Alastair Wren seemed entirely at ease. He had arrived that afternoon, invited by Sir Edmund under the pretense of consulting on a missing antique. Wren was a small, elegant man with calm hands, a soft voice, and a habit of listening as though silence itself were giving testimony. After dinner, Sir Edmund led him to the library. A fire burned low beneath a carved mantel. The room smelled of leather, wax, and damp stone. Rain trembled against the windows, and somewhere within the walls, old pipes sighed. "I am going to change my will tomorrow," Sir Edmund said. Wren looked toward him. "Tonight, then, is a dangerous night." Sir Edmund smiled faintly. "That is why you are here." He unlocked a drawer and removed a sealed envelope. "If anything happens to me, this will interest you." Before Wren could reply, a sound came from above them. A soft footstep. Then another. Sir Edmund looked toward the ceiling. His expression changed, not fear but recognition. At midnight, the household heard the bell. Not the front bell, not the servant's bell. The old nursery bell. It had not been used in 30 years. Its thin ringing drifted down the corridor like a child calling from a dream. By the time they reached Sir Edmund's bedroom, the door was locked. Julian broke it open with his shoulder. The room beyond was warm, scented faintly with lavender smoke. Sir Edmund lay in his armchair beside the fire, his head tilted peacefully to one side, his fingers resting on the arm as though he had fallen asleep while listening to the rain. But on the carpet near his feet was a single wet footprint. And upon the desk, written in a hand that trembled but did not fail, were 3 words. "She came back." Lady Beatrice gave a quiet cry and turned away. Detective Wren stepped into the room and closed his umbrella, though he had not been outside. The doctor was sent for, but Wren knew before the man arrived. Sir Edmund had been given something, not violent, not dramatic, a poison delicate enough to let a man appear merely tired. "Who was she?" Wren asked softly. No one spoke. The rain answered for them. Only later in the library did Miss Clara Vale whisper the name. "Eleanor's." Wren looked up from the hearth. "Sir Edmund's wife." Clara nodded. "She died here 30 years ago in the nursery." Lady Beatrice, standing near the window, closed her eyes. She fell from the balcony. There was a storm that night too. And the nursery bell. "It rang once," Clara said, "just before she died." The house seemed to grow colder. Wren spent the next morning in quiet inspection. He found no forced window, no hidden intruder, no mud upon the stairs. But in Sir Edmund's bedroom, the wet footprint troubled him. It was small, narrow, and made not by a boot, but by a slipper. In the corridor outside, the carpet was dry. In the nursery, however, beneath dust sheets and faded wallpaper, he found a basin of rainwater placed near the balcony door. Beside it lay a lady's slipper, damp at the sole. It was not evidence of a ghost. It was evidence of theater. At luncheon, the family ate little. Rain darkened the day until the lamps had to be lit by noon. The house felt suspended between hours, every room listening to another. Wren watched them carefully. Julian drummed his fingers whenever money was mentioned. Lady Beatrice winced whenever her mother's name was spoken. Mr. Price avoided looking toward the sealed envelope now resting in Wren's coat. Miss Clara Vale remained composed, but once, when thunder rolled beyond the glass, her hand moved to her throat. That evening, Wren opened Sir Edmund's envelope. Inside was not a will. It was a confession. Sir Edmund had written that Eleanor Kingsford had not fallen by accident. She had discovered that her husband intended to send Clara Vale away with her infant son, a child born in secrecy, fathered by Sir Edmund himself. Eleanor had threatened scandal. In a quarrel beside the nursery balcony, Sir Edmund had struck her. She had fallen into the rain. He had lived 30 years with the lie. But the confession ended strangely. "Someone knows. They rang the bell last night. Tomorrow I shall speak." Wren sat long after reading, while the fire settled into embers. The answer lay not in who hated Sir Edmund. Many had reason. The answer lay in who feared the truth after his death. At 10, he gathered them in the nursery. Rain blew against the balcony doors. The old cradle stood beneath a white sheet. The nursery bell hung near the fireplace, its cord newly repaired. "You all believed," Wren said, "that Sir Edmund was killed to silence a confession. But the confession was already written. The murderer did not know that." Julian shifted. "Then who?" "The person who staged Eleanor's return, the wet slipper, the bell, the words on the desk, all designed to make us look backward toward a dead woman." He turned to Clara Vale. Her face remained still. "Your son," Wren said gently, "was Sir Edmund's child. Had the new will been signed, he would have inherited a large portion of Kingsford estate. But if Sir Edmund confessed first, your son's name would be dragged through scandal. You feared shame more than poverty. Clara's eyes glistened, but she did not deny it. I loved him once, she whispered. Then I feared him. Then I waited for him to become kind. He never did. You gave him the poison in his evening cordial, Wren said. Then rang the nursery bell, placed the footprint, and wrote the message with his hand while he was dying. The rain softened. Lady Beatrice began to weep, not loudly, but with the exhaustion of someone whose whole childhood had shifted beneath her feet. Clara looked toward the balcony doors. She came back, she said, not as a ghost, as guilt. No one answered. By morning, the rain had stopped. Kingsford Manor stood washed and pale beneath a sky of pearl. Water dripped from the ivy. The lawns shone silver. In the nursery, the balcony doors were opened for the first time in 30 years, and fresh air moved through the room like forgiveness entering quietly. Detective Wren left before breakfast. At the gate, he turned back once to look at the manor. It no longer seemed haunted, only remembered. Chapter 3. Guests behind polite smiles. The first snow of December fell as if it had been invited. It descended softly over Whitmere House, settling upon the dark roof, the stone lions by the steps, and the long gravel drive where carriage wheels had left half-moon tracks beneath the white. Inside, every window glowed amber. Fires burned in marble hearths. Crystal glasses caught the candlelight. Somewhere beyond the drawing room doors, a string quartet played a slow waltz that seemed too gentle for the secrets gathered beneath that roof. Lady Evelyn Whitmere had arranged the dinner with exquisite care. The table was dressed in ivory linen, silver candlesticks, winter roses, and small porcelain place cards written in her own hand. She was known for such evenings. Her guests always arrived polished, charming, and beautifully dressed, wearing manners as carefully as jewels. Yet Inspector Henry Vale, seated near the fire with a glass untouched beside him, had long ago learned that politeness was the finest mask ever invented. He watched them as they smiled. There was Mr. Adrian Crowe, a banker with soft hands and a laugh that arrived a fraction too late. Beside him sat Miss Helena March, a widow in midnight blue, whose eyes missed nothing though her words revealed nothing. At the far end stood Captain Felix Arden, handsome, restless, and too fond of turning his signet ring. Near the piano, young Clara Whitmere, Evelyn's niece, whispered with the house secretary, Mr. Thomas Gray, a quiet man with ink on his cuff and worry in his posture. And presiding over them all was Lord Victor Whitmere, Evelyn's older brother, a man with a broad smile and a voice polished smooth by inheritance. To friendship, he declared, lifting his glass. Everyone drank. Inspector Vale did not. He had been invited by Lady Evelyn that afternoon, not as a guest, but as insurance. There is something wrong in this house, she had told him in the conservatory, while snow gathered upon the glass roof above them. Someone here has been opening my late husband's locked cabinet. What was inside it? Her fingers tightened around her handkerchief. Letters, and perhaps a truth that should have remained buried. Before he could ask more, the dinner bell had rung. Now at 10:30, Lady Evelyn rose from the table and excused herself. She smiled, apologized for a headache, and passed through the drawing room toward the library. The quartet continued playing. Conversations resumed. Snow tapped gently upon the windows. 15 minutes later, the lights went out. A soft gasp moved through the room. The music stopped. In the darkness, there came one sound. A glass breaking. Then silence. When the lamps were relit, Lady Evelyn was found in the library, seated beside the fire, her white gown bright against the dark leather chair. Her head rested to one side. Her pearl necklace lay broken across the carpet, each pearl scattered like frozen drops of moonlight. On the desk before her was an envelope. It was empty. Inspector Vale stood in the doorway while the guests gathered behind him, their faces pale beneath the lamplight. Lord Victor pressed a hand to his mouth. My God, Evelyn. Vale crossed the room slowly. The windows were locked. The terrace door was bolted from within. The fire burned low but steady. On the carpet near the chair, among the pearls, lay one small black feather. He picked it up with his handkerchief. A hat feather? Asked Captain Arden. Perhaps, said Vale, or a warning misplaced. The doctor arrived from the village near midnight. Poison, he said quietly, something placed in Lady Evelyn's final drink. Swift, refined, and almost merciful. Almost. No one was permitted to leave. The guests sat in the drawing room as snow deepened outside and the fires settled into a red, listening glow. Their faces had changed. Smiles had vanished, but courtesy remained, stiff and fragile like ice over dark water. Inspector Vale questioned them one by one. Mr. Crow claimed he had been near the card table when the lights failed. Miss March had been by the window. Captain Arden had gone to fetch his cigarette case from the hall. Thomas Gray had been arranging correspondence in the small study. Clara Whitmere said she had remained near the piano, though her voice shook as she said it. "And Lord Victor?" Vale asked. "I was with the others," Victor replied. "Surely someone saw me." No one answered quickly enough. Vale spent the early hours walking through the house. Whitmere House had the peculiar silence of old wealth. Corridors held portraits of proud men, none of whom looked kind. The carpets swallowed footsteps. Behind one panel in the library, Vale discovered the late husband's cabinet. Its lock had been scratched recently. Inside were empty shelves, a dried ink bottle, and the faint smell of sandalwood. In the ashtray beside the hearth, he found the curled corner of a burned letter. Only 3 words remained legible. "Victor knows everything." At dawn, the inspector asked the servants about the broken necklace. Lady Evelyn had worn it often, they said, a gift from her husband. But the clasp had been repaired only yesterday by Mr. Gray, who had taken it to town. Thomas Gray denied nothing. "The clasp was loose," he said. "Lady Evelyn asked me to see to it." "Did you read her letters?" The secretary looked toward the window, where morning snow made the world indistinct. "No, but I knew she feared someone." "Whom?" He hesitated. "Her brother." By noon, the atmosphere in Whitmere House had grown almost tender in its dread. Trays of tea arrived untouched. Logs shifted in the fireplace with small sighs. The guests spoke in lowered voices, as though Lady Evelyn might still hear them from the next room. Inspector Vale requested that everyone return to the library. The pearls had been gathered into a silver bowl, except for one he had kept. He placed it upon the desk, beside the black feather and the burned letter fragment. "Lady Evelyn," he began, "believed someone had been stealing from her husband's cabinet. She was correct. But the thief did not come for jewels or money. The thief came for letters." Lord Victor looked bored, but his fingers had gone white around the arm of his chair. "Old family nonsense," he said. "Old, yes, nonsense, no." Vale turned to the room. Lady Evelyn's husband discovered that the Whitmere fortune had been quietly drained for years. Investments forged, signatures imitated, estates mortgaged twice over. He intended to expose the person responsible, but he died before doing so. Mr. Crow coughed softly. "Financial ruin can create desperate behavior." "Indeed," said Vale, "but guilt is rarely so generous as to belong to everyone." He lifted the pearl. When the lights failed, the murderer entered the library in darkness. Lady Evelyn had already been poisoned, but she was not yet dead. She reached out. She caught at the murderer's sleeve or collar and tore loose this necklace. Miss March leaned forward. "Then the pearls should tell you nothing." "One pearl does." Vale held it near the lamp. "There is black wax upon it, not from the candles, from a seal." He looked at Lord Victor's hand. The signet ring he wore was set with black sealing wax, pressed into its engraved crest where he had sealed a letter earlier that evening. Victor laughed once, absurd. "The feather," Vale continued, "was not from a lady's hat. It came from the plume of your evening cloak, which you claim to have left upstairs. Yet a servant saw you wearing it after dinner, just before Lady Evelyn went to the library." The room had gone perfectly still. "And the envelope," whispered Clara. "Empty because Lord Victor took the final letter, but not before Lady Evelyn burned part of it. She knew. She had invited me so she might speak safely after dinner. He realized this and acted before she could." Victor stood, his smile returning in a pale, ruined form. "My sister was sentimental, weak. She would have destroyed us all." "No," said Vale quietly. "She would have destroyed only the lie." For a moment, the snow outside seemed to stop falling. Then Lord Victor sat down again, slowly. like a man lowering himself into the life he had made. By evening, the police carriage carried him away beneath a sky the color of pewter. The guests departed soon after, their polite smiles folded away at last, their secrets drawn tighter around them against the cold. Inspector Vale remained a while in the library. The fire had burned low. The silver bowl of pearls rested on the desk, each one softly luminous in the fading light. He thought of Lady Evelyn, arranging roses, writing place cards, inviting her murderer to dinner because truth, like a guest, sometimes arrives wearing perfect manners. Outside, snow covered the carriage tracks. By morning, Whitmere House would look untouched. But beneath its quiet roof, something had finally ended. Chapter 4. The Locked Study at Midnight. The snow began shortly before midnight, soft and deliberate, drifting over the roof of Alderwick Hall until every chimney, gable, and iron railing wore a quiet crown of white. Inside, the house was warm with lamplight and old wood smoke. The long corridors smelled faintly of beeswax, leather, and the orange peel that had been drying near the kitchen fire since afternoon. In the drawing room, the guests spoke softly over brandy and tea, their voices lowered by the hour and by the storm pressing gently against the windows. At the center of the house, behind a dark oak door, stood Lord Nathaniel Ashcombe's study. It was the one room no servant entered without permission. It contained his papers, his ledgers, his private correspondence, and according to whispered rumor, the truth about the family fortune. At 11:45, Lord Ashcombe rose from his armchair. He was an old man, narrow in the shoulders, elegant in the way of those who have never carried anything heavier than a secret. His silver hair caught the firelight. His black velvet jacket was buttoned neatly over a white waistcoat. "I shall retire to my study," he said. "At midnight I will ring for Mr. Sable." Mr. Sable, his solicitor, looked up sharply. "For the will." "For the truth," said Lord Ashcombe. No one smiled. His niece Vivian lowered her gaze to her embroidery. His son Edward stared into the fire as though it had insulted him. Mrs. Lillian Hart, the widowed companion of the late Lady Ashcombe, sat stiffly with her hands folded. And Dr. Merritt, who had arrived earlier to attend Lord Ashcombe's cough, watched the old man with careful professional sadness. Only Detective Marcel Duvin seemed tranquil. He had been invited for the weekend by Lord Ashcombe himself, ostensibly for chess. But Duvin, with his precise mustache, polished shoes, and eyes that lingered where others hurried past, had understood at once that no man summons a detective to a snowbound house for recreation. At 5 minutes to midnight, the study door closed. At midnight, the clock in the hall struck 12. At 1 minute past, a bell rang from inside the study. Then came a sound like a chair falling. When they reached the door, it was locked from within. Edward shouted, Vivian trembled, Mr. Sable called Lord Ashcombe's name twice. No answer came. The door was broken open at last. The study lay before them in firelit stillness. Lord Ashcombe sat behind his desk, his head bowed over a sheet of paper. A silver letter opener rested near his hand, untouched. The window was latched from within. The chimney held only a modest fire, too narrow for any living person to pass. The key remained in the lock on the inside of the door. On the paper beneath Lord Ashcombe's hand was a single sentence, written in uneven ink. "The house knows who entered." Detective Duvin stepped quietly past the threshold. "Entered," Edward whispered, "but no one could have entered." Duvin glanced at the locked door, the closed window, the glowing hearth. "Then we must ask," he said, "whether the room itself has lied." The doctor declared death had been caused by a sudden failure of the heart, perhaps brought on by shock. Yet Duvin's gaze remained fixed on the old man's teacup. A faint bitter scent rose from it, nearly hidden beneath bergamot. On the carpet near the desk, he found a tiny crescent of blue wax. On the mantel clock, the minute hand had been moved backward by exactly 7 minutes. And beneath the desk, caught on a brass drawer handle, was a thread of dark green silk. The household was gathered in the library, where the fire had burned low and the snow made a hush against the glass. No one left the drawing room after Lord Ashcombe entered the study, Edward insisted. "Not quite," said Duvin gently. Vivian looked up. Mrs. Hart went to fetch her shawl. Lillian Hart's face remained composed. "I was gone no more than 3 minutes." And Dr. Merritt was called to the passage by a servant, Mr. Sable added. The doctor nodded. A mistake, no one had called me. Duvin listened without interruption, his fingers resting together like the roof of a chapel. Later, he examined the passage outside the study. The snowlight from the windows made the corridor pale and dreamlike. Against the wainscoting, nearly invisible, he noticed a thin line where dust had been disturbed. A panel. Behind it was a narrow service passage, long unused, smelling of stone and cold air. It led not into the study, but beside it, ending behind a bookcase whose rear had been sealed with iron brackets. No body could pass through, but something smaller could. Duvin returned to the study and stood before the bookcase. One shelf held a row of legal volumes. Their bindings were dusty, except for one, volume IV of estate law, clean along its lower edge. When he pulled it out, a narrow speaking tube was revealed, hidden in shadow. He smiled faintly. The house, he murmured, has a voice. At breakfast, no one had appetite. Snow continued to fall, brightening the windows while deepening the sense that Alderwick Hall had drifted away from the world. Silver spoons rested untouched. Coffee cooled in porcelain cups. Duvin asked Mr. Sable about the will. The solicitor hesitated. Lord Ashcombe intended to alter it. He told me only that the heir named in the existing document had no moral claim. Edward's face hardened. I am his son. Blood, said Duvin, is not always the same as claim. Vivian's needle slipped from her fingers. By noon, Duvin had discovered the first truth. Lord Ashcombe had long suspected that Edward was not his child. The late Lady Ashcombe had confessed as much in a private diary. The real heir, by blood and by a later codicil, was Vivian, the niece he had quietly educated and protected. Edward knew enough to fear disinheritance. But fear was not proof. The proof was quieter. Duvin found it in the nursery wing, where old trunks slept beneath dust sheets. In one trunk lay a green silk scarf, recently torn. In another, hidden beneath yellowed lace, he found a small brass syringe, stained with a bitter almond scent. Poison, introduced not into the tea after the study was locked, but before. Still, the locked room remained. At dusk, Duvin assembled them in the study. The fire was renewed. Outside, the snow had stopped, and the world beyond the window shone faintly beneath the rising moon. Lord Ashcombe's chair stood empty, turned slightly toward the desk. The murder, Duvin began, was not performed after the door was locked. It was prepared before. The poisoned tea was placed here earlier. Lord Ashcombe drank it alone. Edward gave a sharp breath. Then anyone could have done it. Anyone could have poisoned him, said Duvin. Only one person arranged the illusion afterward. He touched the mantel clock. The bell rang at 1 minute past midnight, but the clock was moved back 7 minutes. We were meant to believe Lord Ashcombe had lived longer than he did. In truth, he died before midnight. Mrs. Hart whispered, impossible. No, merely theatrical. Duvin turned toward the bookcase. The sentence on the paper was not written by Lord Ashcombe. It was dictated through the speaking tube while he was dying, perhaps repeated by him in confusion, perhaps written under terror. The house knows who entered, a clever phrase directing us to the hidden passage. He held up the blue wax. This came from a solicitor's document seal. Mr. Sable went pale, but Duvin shook his head. Not guilt, theft. Mr. Sable opened the old will earlier tonight, hoping to learn its contents. A foolish act, not a murderous one. Then he looked at Edward. The green silk thread came from your scarf. The servant who falsely summoned Dr. Merritt wore your livery cloak. You needed confusion in the passage, and you needed witnesses uncertain of time. You also knew of the speaking tube from childhood games in this house. Edward's mouth curved, but his eyes did not. My father was already dying. Yes, said Duvin softly, because you had placed the poison in his tea caddy that afternoon. The last cup merely completed what you began. Silence gathered. At last, Edward sat down, not in surrender, but in exhaustion, as though he had spent his life walking toward this chair. He would have given everything to Vivian, he said, everything. Duvin's voice was very gentle. And so you lost the only thing Noel could take from you, your name. By morning, Alderwick Hall was quiet. The police carriage had gone, leaving dark tracks through the snow. Vivian stood at the study window, watching the winter sun touch the white fields. Mr. Sable folded the corrected will with trembling care. Mrs. Hart wept softly in the hall, not for Edward alone, but for all the years that had been arranged like furniture around a lie. Detective Duvin paused at the study door before leaving. The room seemed smaller now, less mysterious, merely sad. The fire had burned down to amber coals. On the desk lay a fresh sheet of paper, blank and waiting. He closed the door gently behind him. Some rooms are locked to keep secrets in. Others are locked because the truth has been waiting inside all along. Chapter 5. Footsteps in the East Wing. The footsteps began on the third night of snow. They came after midnight, when Blackthorn Hall had settled into its deepest silence, when the fires were low, the curtains drawn, and the long windows held only the reflection of candlelight and falling white beyond the glass. At first, they were so faint that one might have mistaken them for old timber shrinking in the cold. But then they came again. Slow, measured, deliberate. Across the East Wing. No one had lived in the East Wing for 15 years. Its doors were covered in dust. Its rooms were sheeted and locked. Its corridor, with its faded blue carpet and portraits of forgotten ancestors, had been closed since the death of Lady Margaret Blackthorn, who was said to have walked there each night in grief before vanishing forever from the balcony room. At breakfast, no one spoke of ghosts. They spoke instead of weather. The snow had blocked the road to the village. The telegraph line had fallen beneath ice. The estate lay wrapped in a white stillness that made the outside world feel less real than the portraits on the wall. Sir Rowland Blackthorn sat at the head of the table, gaunt and severe, his pale hands resting beside an untouched plate of kippers. His daughter Isabel wore a gray morning dress and watched the windows as though expecting someone to appear beyond them. Mr. Lionel Harrow, Sir Rowland's cousin and heir, smiled too often. Mrs. Graves, the housekeeper, poured coffee with a steady hand, though there were shadows beneath her eyes. And beside the hearth, with a notebook resting unopened on his knee, sat Detective Emile Varden. He had arrived the day before, invited by Sir Rowland under the modest explanation that certain family jewels had gone missing. Varden was small, impeccably dressed, and possessed of a gentle voice that often made people underestimate the sharpness of his mind. He listened to the conversation as one listens to music in another room, waiting for the false note. At last Sir Rowland spoke. "You heard them, Mr. Varden." "I did. The footsteps." "Yes." Lionel gave a light laugh. "Old houses complain in winter." "Indeed," said Varden, "but old houses rarely pause outside locked doors." The room grew still. Sir Rowland looked toward the closed hall. "Tonight we shall open the East Wing." No one objected, but Isabel's teacup trembled softly against its saucer. All day the house seemed to wait. Snow pressed against the lower windows. The sky remained the color of pewter. In the drawing room, the fire made a low golden murmur, while beyond the door the corridors stretched dim and listening. Varden spent the afternoon examining the lock to the East Wing. Dust lay thick across the floor before it, yet in that dust was one narrow disturbance. Aligned, not footsteps. Something had been dragged. He said nothing. At 9, the household gathered near the East Wing door. Sir Rowland held the key himself. Mrs. Graves carried a lamp. Lionel stood behind Isabel, his face pale despite his smile. The key turned with difficulty. The door opened. A breath of cold air moved out from the dark corridor, carrying with it the smell of dust, old lavender, and something faintly damp. Sheets covered the furniture in the rooms beyond. Portraits watched through veils of gray. Their footsteps sank soundlessly into the faded carpet. In the balcony room, where Lady Margaret had last been seen alive, Varden found the window fastened, the bed sheeted, the dressing table empty except for a cracked mirror and a silver hairbrush tarnished black with age. Then Isabel whispered, "There." On the floor near the balcony doors lay a single fresh rose. Red. Its petals were soft, unwithered, impossible. Sir Rowland turned deathly pale. "She always wore red roses," he said. Lionel crossed himself with theatrical delicacy. "God preserve us." Varden knelt and touched the stem. "Cut this morning," he said. No one slept early that night. The household remained in the drawing room, wrapped in lamplight and unease. Outside, the snow continued falling, gentle as breath upon glass. At 11:30, Sir Rowland retired to his study. He refused company. At midnight, the footsteps began again. This time, everyone heard them. Step, pause, step, across the ceiling above the drawing room, where the east wing corridor ran like a hidden river through the old house. Isabel rose, white-faced. Lionel seized a candlestick. Mrs. Graves whispered a prayer. Varden lifted one finger for silence. The footsteps stopped. Then came a cry from the study. They found Sir Rowland collapsed beside his desk, alive but barely conscious. Beside his hand lay an open letter, written in a woman's slanting hand. 15 years is long enough. When Sir Rowland woke near dawn, he would say only one thing. Margaret knows. Varden sat beside the study fire until morning, watching the ash whiten around the coals. Then he began again. The letter was old paper but new ink. The rose was fresh. The footsteps were real. The east wing was locked, yet someone entered it. The question then was not whether Lady Margaret had returned. It was who needed the dead to walk. At midday, Varden visited the conservatory. It stood cold beneath a glass roof furred with snow. Most of the plants had been moved indoors for winter, but along one wall grew a row of carefully tended roses, red roses. Mrs. Graves found him there. "You have kind hands for a housekeeper," Varden said. "The roses approve of you." She looked away. Lady Margaret loved them. "And you loved Lady Margaret." Mrs. Graves did not answer. In the nursery wing, Varden found the next piece. Behind a loose panel in a linen cupboard lay a pair of narrow wooden pattens with felt underneath and lead weights fixed inside. When dragged slowly by a cord through the service passage, they would make a sound above the drawing room like footsteps crossing the east wing. He followed the cord. It led behind the wall to a disused maid's stair and down toward the servants' corridor. Not a ghost, a performance. Yet one question remained: why frighten Sir Rowland now? The answer came from Isabel. She found Varden in the library that afternoon, where pale winter light rested on the books like dust. "My mother did not vanish," she said. Varden turned gently. "I know." Isabel's eyes filled, but her voice remained steady. "I was 8. I heard them quarrel. My father said she would ruin him. She had learned something about Lionel, something in the accounts. That night she was gone. They told me she walked into the snow." "And did you believe it?" "I wanted to. Children are loyal to the hand that feeds them, even when it trembles." At dusk, Varden gathered them in the east wing. The corridor had been lit with lamps. Snowlight pressed at the tall windows, and the covered furniture stood like silent witnesses beneath white sheets. Sir Rowland, weakened but upright, sat in a chair near the balcony room. Lionel stood by the wall, smiling no longer. Isabel remained near the door. Mrs. Graves held her hands clasped before her. Varden began softly. The footsteps were arranged to terrify Sir Rowland. The rose was placed to awaken his guilt. The letter was meant to make him speak. Sir Rowland closed his eyes. Lady Margaret discovered that Lionel had forged debts in Sir Rowland's name, Varden continued. She intended to expose him, but Sir Rowland, fearing scandal, refused to protect her. Lionel followed her here to this room. Lionel's voice was thin, absurd. "No, the balcony rail was repaired the week after she vanished. I found the carpenter's mark beneath the paint." Mrs. Graves gave a small sob. Varden looked at her with compassion. "You suspected the truth for years, but suspicion is a poor weapon, so you made a ghost." She lifted her chin. He would not confess. "No," said Varden, "but someone else might." He turned to Lionel. "You feared Sir Rowland would finally break. Last night you placed poison in his evening cordial, hoping his weak heart would finish the story before he could speak. But the dose was too small." Lionel stepped back. "You cannot prove." "The vial is in your traveling case, hidden beneath the false bottom, and the account ledgers Lady Margaret found are still behind the mirror in the balcony room." Sir Rowland began to weep. It was a quiet, ruined sound. By morning, the snow had stopped. Police arrived from the village as the road reopened beneath a pale sun. Lionel was taken away without struggle. Mrs. Graves stood in the hall, no longer afraid, though sorrow had aged her overnight. Isabel walked alone to the balcony room and opened the windows for the first time in 15 years. Cold air entered, clean and bright. Detective Varden watched the white fields beyond the glass. Somewhere below, water dripped from the eaves in slow, silver notes. The east wing was silent now. Not empty, only at peace. Chapter 6. The Portrait, the Letter, and the Missing Key. Snow came quietly to Hailwick House, covering the gardens, the sundial, and the frozen fountain with a tenderness that almost made the old estate look innocent. By evening, the windows glowed warmly against the blue winter dark. Firelight moved across polished floors. The scent of cedar logs and old books filled the drawing room, where the family had gathered for the reading of Sir Ambrose Hailwick's final instructions. He had died 3 days earlier in his sleep, though sleep in certain houses can be a word used politely for many things. Detective Lucien Armand stood near the mantel, small, precise, and serene, his gloved hands resting on the silver head of his cane. Sir Ambrose had asked for him by letter a week before his death, writing only, "Come before the portrait is moved." The portrait hung above the library fireplace. It showed Lady Seraphina Hailwick, Sir Ambrose's first wife, painted in youth with dark eyes, a pearl comb, and a smile so slight it seemed to conceal both sorrow and accusation. For 20 years, the portrait had never been moved. Until that morning. A pale rectangle marked the wall behind it. At the center of that bare space was a small iron door, no larger than a book, set into the stone. And its key was missing. Mr. Felix Greaves, the solicitor, stood beside the library table with a sealed letter in his hand. Sir Ambrose's nephew, Martin, leaned impatiently against a chair. Mrs. Adelaide Hailwick, the second wife, sat near the fire, composed in black silk. Her daughter, Celia, kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, and old Mrs. Rook, the housekeeper, watched the portrait as though it might speak. Greaves cleared his throat. Sir Ambrose instructed that this letter be read only when the portrait was removed. He broke the seal. Before he could unfold the page, the lamps flickered. A gust passed through the room, though every window was closed. The fire sank low, and from somewhere inside the wall came a soft metallic click. When the lamp steadied, the solicitor's face had gone white. The letter was gone from his hand. No one had moved, or rather, no one admitted to moving. Detective Armand looked at the empty fingers of the solicitor, then at the portrait resting against the wall. Lady Seraphina's painted eyes turned toward the room. "How interesting," he murmured. "The dead lady keeps her secrets well." The household searched the library at once. Rugs were lifted, chairs moved, curtains shaken. The letter was nowhere. The iron door remained locked. The key could not be found. Outside, snow thickened against the glass, softening the world beyond into silence. Armand asked each person what they had seen. Martin had seen nothing but the lamp's flicker. Adelaide claimed she had felt faint and closed her eyes. Celia said she had heard the click from the wall. Mrs. Rook whispered that Lady Seraphina had never liked strangers touching her portrait. Mr. Greaves insisted the letter had vanished from his hand, as if plucked by an invisible thief. "Invisible thieves," said Armand gently, "are usually visible persons in a hurry." He examined the portrait. On its gilt frame near the lower edge, he found a fresh smear of soot. On the carpet below the mantel lay one tiny flake of red wax. Beneath the library table, caught on a carved foot, was a thread of black lace. Small things, but small things have a habit of surviving where lies do not. That night, no one slept easily. The snow wrapped Hailwick House in a hush so complete that every sound seemed chosen. The settling of beams, the sigh of fire ash, the distant ticking of clocks in empty corridors. Shortly after midnight, a maid screamed from the west gallery. The portrait had been rehung, not above the fireplace, at the far end of the corridor, where moonlight through the tall window touched Lady Seraphina's painted face. Across the canvas, in dark ink, someone had written, "Open what he locked away." The missing key hung from the portrait's pearl comb. By dawn, the household had gathered again in the library. The key was small, brass, and cold from the corridor air. Armand took it carefully, unlocked the iron door, and drew from within a narrow cedar box. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with faded blue ribbon, a woman's glove, and a miniature portrait of a young man who was not Sir Ambrose. Adelaide looked away. Martin gave a short laugh. So the sainted Seraphina had a lover. No, said Armand softly, not a lover, a husband. The room stilled. Mr. Greaves unfolded the letters with trembling care. They revealed that Lady Seraphina had been secretly married before Sir Ambrose to a poor naval officer believed lost at sea. When the officer returned, Sir Ambrose concealed the truth to protect the Hailwick name and keep Seraphina's fortune. The officer vanished soon after visiting the estate. And Lady Seraphina died within the year. Accident, Celia whispered. Mrs. Rook began to cry. Armand looked at the old housekeeper. You knew. I knew she was unhappy, Mrs. Rook said. I knew she begged him to let her go. The detective nodded toward the cedar box. Sir Ambrose was ready to confess. That missing letter must have named the person who helped him hide the officer's fate. Every gaze shifted. Martin's impatience had faded. Adelaide's fingers rested motionless on her black lace cuffs. Celia looked between them, frightened by the shape of silence. Armand placed the red wax flake upon the table. The letter vanished during darkness. It did not float away. It was taken by someone close enough to Mr. Greaves, someone wearing black lace, someone who had reason to fear the past. Adelaide rose slowly. You cannot mean me. I do not mean you because of fear, said Armand. I mean you because of timing. Her eyes flashed. You stood beside the lamp before it flickered. You lowered the flame yourself. The gust was made by opening the narrow ash vent behind the fireplace. The click came from the iron door's spring, triggered by heat. A little theater, madam, elegant but over-arranged. Martin frowned. Then why return the key? Because the theft had served its purpose. The murderer wanted the box opened, but not the letter read. Mrs. Rook whispered, murderer. Armand's gaze settled not on Adelaide, but on Martin. Sir Ambrose did not die naturally. His sleeping draft was altered. He intended to expose an old crime and perhaps a newer one, Martin's gambling debts, paid quietly from estate funds he had no right to touch. Martin's mouth hardened. The black lace thread belonged to Adelaide, Armand continued, but it was placed beneath the table to accuse her. The soot on the portrait frame came from the servant's stair fireplace, where the portrait was hidden until midnight. Only one person had the strength to carry it there and back without help. Martin took one step toward the door. Celia stood first. No, she said. It was barely a word, yet it stopped him. Armand drew the missing letter from inside the hollow back of Martin's chair, where he had slipped it during the confusion. Its seal was broken. Its contents were clear. Sir Ambrose had written the truth. Martin's father, not Adelaide, had helped bury the naval officer's body in the old ice house after a quarrel with Sir Ambrose. Martin had discovered this and used it to blackmail his uncle for years. When Sir Ambrose chose confession over silence, Armand said, you chose poison. The fire cracked softly. Martin's face, handsome and empty, seemed suddenly young. He would have ruined us, he whispered. No, said Armand. He would only have stopped pretending you were not already ruined. By afternoon, the snow had ceased. Police tracks marked the white drive. The portrait of Lady Seraphina was returned to the library wall, cleaned of ink, its gaze steady above the fireplace. The cedar box remained open on the table, no longer a tomb for secrets, but evidence of a woman who had once tried to be free. Armand stood alone before the painting before he left. In the quiet glow of winter light, Lady Seraphina's slight smile seemed changed. Less accusing, perhaps. Or perhaps the house, relieved of its long deception, had simply grown easier to breathe within. Behind him, the iron door stood open. The key lay in its lock. And for the first time in 20 years, nothing in Hailwick House needed hiding. Chapter 7. The Wrong Accusation. Snow lay gently over Fairbourne Lodge, softening the roof, the frozen hedges, and the long carriage road that curved through the sleeping pines. Inside, the house was all warmth and quiet ceremony. Fires glowed in every grate. Lamps burned low beneath amber shades. The curtains were drawn against the winter night, and in the dining room, silver cutlery shone beside crystal glasses still holding the last red traces of wine. It should have been a peaceful evening, but peaceful evenings are often the ones chosen by secrets. Sir Malcolm Fairbourne had invited his household to dinner with unusual formality. At 68, he remained a handsome man with a proud white mustache and eyes that had grown sharper as his body had grown frail. He spoke little through the meal. When he did, everyone listened. His nephew Charles laughed too readily. His ward, Miss Nora Ellison, sat with her hands folded in her lap, pale but composed. Mrs. Bell, the housekeeper, moved quietly near the sideboard. Mr. Whitlow, the family solicitor, watched Sir Malcolm with guarded concern. And by the fireplace sat Detective Adrian Lorne, a guest no one had expected. Sir Malcolm had sent for him that morning. "There will be an accusation tonight," he had said privately. "I fear it may be the wrong one." At 10:30, Sir Malcolm rose. "I have been deceived," he said. The room went still. His gaze moved to Nora. "You know what I mean." Nora's face lost all color. Charles stood at once. "Uncle, surely this can wait." "No," said Sir Malcolm. "Truth has waited long enough." He turned to Detective Lorne. "After coffee, I shall give you the letter." But after coffee, Sir Malcolm was dead. They found him in the conservatory, seated beneath the glass roof while snow drifted beyond it in silent sheets. A cup lay broken near his chair. A small pool of coffee darkened the stone floor. His hand rested against his chest, and beside it lay a torn envelope. "Empty." Nora Ellison stood in the doorway, trembling. In her hand was the missing letter. Charles pointed at her before anyone spoke. "She killed him." The words landed softly, but they froze the room. Nora did not deny holding the letter. She did not explain the tears on her face. She only whispered, "I was too late." Detective Lorne stepped past her into the conservatory. The air smelled of damp earth, bitter coffee, and winter roses. Near Sir Malcolm's chair, one pale petal lay crushed underfoot. On the small table, the sugar bowl had been disturbed, though Sir Malcolm was known never to take sugar. Lorne bent close to the broken cup. "Poison?" asked Whitlow. "Perhaps," said Lorne, "but poison is rarely as simple as the person found holding the secret." The doctor confirmed it near midnight. Sir Malcolm had been poisoned, something fast, elegant, and nearly tasteless. Nora was placed under watch in the blue sitting room. The others gathered by the fire, speaking in low, careful voices. Charles declared that Nora had feared exposure. Whitlow admitted that Sir Malcolm had recently altered his will. Mrs. Bell said nothing at all, though once, when Nora's name was mentioned, her old hands tightened around her apron. Lorne listened. Then he asked to see the letter. Nora gave it to him without resistance. It was not a confession. It was not a threat. It was a birth certificate. Nora Ellison, believed to be the daughter of Sir Malcolm's late friend, was in truth Sir Malcolm's own child. She did not fear exposure, Lorne murmured. She feared rejection. Nora looked up, her eyes shining. "He was going to acknowledge me tonight. He said he had wronged my mother. He said he would set it right." "Then why run with the letter?" "Because Charles saw it fall. I thought he would destroy it." Charles gave a cold laugh from the doorway. "Convenient." Lorne turned to him gently. "Very." The snow continued through the night. Fairbourne Lodge seemed to drift farther from the world with every hour. In the library, Lorne examined Sir Malcolm's desk. One drawer had been forced, but poorly, as though by someone wishing the damage to be noticed. Inside, he found a torn corner of blue paper and a faint dusting of white powder near the inkwell. In the kitchen, he found the coffee tray. 4 cups had been served in the drawing room. One separate cup had been carried to the conservatory by Mrs. Bell at Sir Malcolm's request. The sugar tongs were dry. The spoon beside Sir Malcolm's cup was wet. A small contradiction. A house may lie, but objects often grow careless. At dawn, Lorne walked alone into the conservatory. Snowlight filled the glass room with a pale, dreamlike glow. The winter roses leaned in their pots, red and white and cream, breathing faint sweetness into the cold air. There he found the second clue. Behind a rose tub lay a silver cufflink engraved with a falcon. Charles's cufflink. Too obvious. Lorne placed it in his pocket and smiled sadly. By breakfast, the accusation against Nora had hardened in every mind except his. She had been found with the letter. She had entered the conservatory moments before the body was discovered. She had cried, refused to speak, and benefited from Sir Malcolm's changed will. It was perfect. And perfection, Lorne knew, was the vanity of amateurs. He asked Mrs. Bell to join him in the pantry. "You loved Sir Malcolm," he said. The old woman's eyes filled at once. "I served him 40 years. And protected him. When I could. Did you know about Nora?" She nodded. "Her mother came here once, snowing it was, much like tonight. She carried the baby in a blue shawl. Sir Malcolm sent her away. I never forgave him. But Nora did." Mrs. Bell looked toward the door. She wanted to. At noon, Lorne gathered them all in the conservatory. The snow had stopped. Outside, the gardens lay white and motionless. Inside, the fire in the adjoining room cast a soft pulse of gold across the glass. Nora stood near the roses. Charles stood opposite her, elegant and pale. Whitlow held his papers like a shield. Mrs. Bell remained by the door. "The accusation," Lorne began, "was made too quickly. Miss Ellison was meant to be seen with the letter. The forced drawer, the broken cup, the cufflink beneath the rose tub, all of it points neatly toward guilt." Charles folded his arms. "Because she is guilty." "No," said Lorne, "because someone wanted a simple story." He lifted the cufflink. This was found where any detective might discover it. Yet no murderer hides evidence against himself so badly unless he wishes to be thought careless. Charles's expression shifted. "Sir Malcolm's coffee was not poisoned in the pot," Lorne continued, "nor in the sugar. He took none. The poison was placed on the spoon, a spoon brought separately after coffee by someone who knew his habits." Mrs. Bell gave a small gasp. Lorne turned, not to her but to Whitlow. The solicitor went very still. "You advised Sir Malcolm on the altered will," Lorne said. "You knew Nora would inherit. You also managed Charles's debts quietly, illegally, and profitably. If Charles lost his expectations, your fraud would be exposed." Whitlow's lips parted. "This is absurd." "Is it? The powder near the inkwell in Sir Malcolm's desk matches residue found in your traveling medicine case. You forced the drawer after his death to suggest someone searched for the letter. Then you placed Charles's cufflink in the conservatory, hoping suspicion would move from Nora to him if needed." Charles stared at him. "You used me." Whitlow said nothing. Lorne's voice softened. "Sir Malcolm feared the wrong accusation. He knew the truth would hurt Nora. He did not know someone would turn that pain into a weapon." For a moment, the only sound was melting snow dripping from the glass roof. Then Mrs. Bell crossed the room and took Nora's hand. The gesture broke something in the silence. Whitlow sat down slowly, as though his bones had lost their purpose. By evening, the police had taken him away. Charles left soon after, not in grief, but in embarrassment, which was the closest thing to shame he possessed. Nora remained in the conservatory until the lamps were lit. Detective Lorne found her beside Sir Malcolm's empty chair, holding the birth certificate carefully in both hands. "He meant to speak," she said. "Yes, but he waited too long." Lorne looked at the snow beyond the glass, now blue beneath the evening sky. "Many truths arrive late," he said, "but not all arrive too late." The house settled around them, warm, quiet, and changed. Outside, the first star appeared above the pines. Inside, the wrong accusation had fallen away, and beneath it, fragile but living, the truth remained. Chapter 8. Secrets hidden in the manor walls. Snow fell upon Briarcliff Manor with a silence so complete, it seemed the world had been folded in white velvet. Beyond the tall windows, the gardens disappeared beneath winter's hand. The fountain slept under ice. The yew trees stood black and still, like mourners gathered around an old grave. Inside, the manor glowed with firelight, amber lamps, and the soft fragrance of cedar smoke rising through rooms that had learned to keep secrets. Detective Julian Marceau arrived just before dusk, his coat dusted with snow, his gloves immaculate, his expression mild enough to be mistaken for innocence. He had been summoned by Lady Helena Briarcliff, who received him in the blue drawing room beside a low fire. "There are noises in the walls," she said. Marceau glanced toward the paneling. "Mice, perhaps." Lady Helena did not smile. Mice do not whisper names. She was a composed woman of 50, elegant in black velvet, with eyes sharpened by sleeplessness. Her late husband, Lord Briarcliff, had died 6 months earlier, leaving the estate to her stepson, Victor, once he returned from abroad. But Victor had arrived that morning, and with him came unrest. Also present in the house were Victor's younger sister, Amelia, pale and watchful, Mr. Cedric Vale, the family solicitor, Mrs. Moss, the housekeeper, and Father Anselm, an old family friend whose gentle hands trembled when he held his tea. At dinner, conversation moved with painful politeness. Victor spoke of selling the manor. Amelia said nothing. Lady Helena's spoon remained untouched beside her soup. From somewhere beyond the dining room wall came a faint sound. Tap, tap, tap. Everyone heard it. Victor laughed, old pipes. But Marceau noticed Mrs. Moss cross herself beneath the table. At midnight, the sound came again. This time it was not tapping. It was a voice. Soft, muffled, and almost tender, it seemed to breathe through the wall beside the staircase. Tell them. Lady Helena fainted before anyone reached her. By morning, the household had changed. Fear had made them honest in posture, if not in speech. Snow pressed against the lower windows. Fires were built higher. No one wandered alone. Marceau began with the walls. Briarcliff Manor was older than it appeared. Behind its graceful rooms lay service passages, priest holes, sealed cupboards, and corridors abandoned when wings were rebuilt across generations. In the great hall, he found a line of paneling slightly warmer than the rest. Behind the oak was a narrow cavity carrying heat from the kitchen chimney. And sound, a whisper spoken below, could travel upward like a ghost. In the servants' passage beneath the stairs, Marceau found a candle stub, a smudge of dark wax, and a torn scrap of paper smelling faintly of lavender. On it was written one name, Elias. When he asked about Elias, no one answered at first. Then Amelia spoke. My brother. Victor turned sharply, half-brother. Lady Helena closed her eyes. Elias Briarcliff had vanished 11 years earlier on the night of a winter ball. The story was simple. A troubled young man, debts, drink, a quarrel with his father, then flight into the snow. His body was never found. Convenient, Marceau murmured. Victor's smile thinned. Are you accusing the dead of bad manners? I never accuse the dead, said Marceau. They are usually more truthful than the living. That afternoon, the manor surrendered its first secret. Behind a tapestry in the music room, Marceau discovered a narrow door, its lock recently oiled. The passage beyond was cold and close, lined with stone. It led between walls to the old chapel wing, where dust lay thick everywhere except along one path. At the end stood a bricked alcove. The mortar was newer than the surrounding stone. Mrs. Moss began to weep when she saw it. No, she whispered, not there. The wall was opened at dusk. Inside lay a rusted hunting knife, a torn velvet cuff, and a signet ring marked with the Briarcliff crest. Amelia turned away, trembling. Victor stared without expression. Lady Helena whispered, Elias. But there was no body. Only evidence placed with care. Too much care. Marceau spent the night in the library, where the fire sank low and snowlight pressed pale against the curtains. He read old correspondence, estate ledgers, and letters tied in faded ribbon. Near dawn, he found what the manor had truly hidden. Elias had not been a reckless son. He had been the rightful heir. Lord Briarcliff had married Elias' mother in secret before marrying Victor and Amelia's mother. The papers proving it had vanished the same night Elias disappeared. Without them, Victor remained heir. At breakfast, Marceau watched every face as Mr. Vale confirmed the law. If such papers existed, the solicitor said carefully, Elias would have inherited before Victor. And if Elias had children, Marceau asked. Father Anselm dropped his spoon. The sound was small, but in that room it rang like a bell. By noon, Marceau had found the second secret hidden in the walls. In the old chapel, behind a loose stone near the altar, lay a packet of documents wrapped in oilcloth. The marriage certificate, letters from Elias, and a baptismal record. A child, a daughter, raised quietly in a convent school under another name. Lady Helena covered her mouth. My husband knew. Someone knew, said Marceau. That evening, the whispers returned. Tell them. This time Marceau followed the sound. Through the servants' passage, past the kitchen hearth beneath the old staircase, he found Amelia holding a candle, her face wet with tears. "I only wanted the truth opened," she said. "You made the manor speak." She nodded. Elias was kind. Victor hated him. Father feared scandal. Then Elias vanished. "And the alcove. I found the ring there years ago. I placed the knife and cuff yesterday. I thought if they believed he had been murdered, someone would confess." Marceau's voice softened. "But someone decided to make your theater useful." She looked at him, frightened. At that moment, a cry came from above. They found Mr. Vale in the library, dead beside the desk, his spectacles broken, ink spilled across his sleeve. Beside his hand lay the baptismal record, torn in two. Victor stood in the doorway. "I found him like this," he said. Marceau looked at the body, the torn paper, then the fireplace. A single page curled among the flames, not yet fully burned. He drew it free with the tongs. It bore Victor's signature. Not once, many times. Forgery practice. At dawn, Marceau gathered them in the great hall. The snow had stopped. Pale light entered through the high windows, revealing dust in the air like golden ash. The walls, so long accused of whispering, stood silent around them. "Amelia created the whispers," Marceau said. "She wished to expose what happened to Elias, but she did not kill Mr. Vale." Victor's face hardened. "Mr. Vale helped your father conceal Elias' marriage papers," Marceau continued. "Years later, he helped you maintain the lie, but when the documents appeared, he intended to save himself by confessing." Victor said quietly, "You have no proof." Marceau held up the charred page. "You practiced your father's signature to forge estate transfers. Mr. Vale knew. He threatened you. Last night, you killed him to silence the man who could connect both crimes." "And Elias," Lady Helena whispered. Marceau turned toward Father Anselm. The priest bowed his head. "He came to me that night," Father Anselm said. "Wounded, terrified. Victor had attacked him, but he lived. I helped him leave England. He begged me to protect his child." The room seemed to breathe. "Elias is alive," Amelia whispered. "In France," said the priest, "ill but alive." Victor reached for a chair but missed it. For once, his elegance deserted him. By evening, he was taken away. Briarcliff Manor grew strangely peaceful after that. The fires burned lower. Doors stood open. Servants moved through rooms long avoided. Amelia sat beside Lady Helena, holding the baptismal record as if it were a fragile flame. Detective Marceau left at twilight. Snow shone blue beneath the fading sky. Behind him, Briarcliff Manor glowed warmly, no longer a house of whispers, but a house that had finally been heard. Secrets had hidden in its walls for years. But walls, like hearts, can only hold so much before they begin to speak. Chapter 9. What truly happened at Kingsford Manor. Rain returned to Kingsford Manor on the evening the truth did. It came softly at first, brushing the tall windows with silver fingers, slipping down the ivy-covered walls, gathering in the hollows of the gravel drive. By dusk, the old house glowed against the storm like a lantern set upon the edge of a dark sea. Firelight stirred in the library. Lamps burned low in the corridors. Every room seemed warm, elegant, and perfectly composed. Yet beneath that composure, Kingsford Manor was listening. Detective Alastair Wren arrived shortly after 7, his umbrella shining with rain, his gloves dry despite the weather. He had been summoned not by the police, but by a letter delivered in a trembling hand. "Come tonight," it read, "before they decide what happened for me." The letter was signed by Lady Beatrice Kingsford. She met him in the blue sitting room, where a fire burned quietly beneath a portrait of her mother, Eleanor. The portrait showed a woman in pale silk, one hand resting upon a nursery chair, her eyes full of something too deep to be called sadness. "They said my father was murdered by Clara Vale," Beatrice whispered. Wren sat opposite her, calm and still. "Miss Vale confessed." "No," Beatrice said. "She surrendered. That is not always the same thing." Outside, rain thickened against the glass. Months earlier, Sir Edmund Kingsford had died in his bedroom after the old nursery bell rang at midnight. Clara Vale, once the governess, had admitted to placing poison in his cordial and staging the return of Lady Eleanor, who had fallen from the nursery balcony 30 years before. The case had seemed closed. But closed cases, Wren knew, sometimes breathed beneath the lid. "Why call me now?" he asked. Beatrice drew a folded paper from her sleeve. "This was found behind the nursery hearth yesterday." It was brittle with age, stained at the edges and written in Sir Edmund's hand. "If I die before I speak, know this, Clara is not the one I fear." Wren read the sentence twice. Then he looked toward the ceiling, where somewhere above them the nursery waited in darkness. At dinner, the remaining household gathered with uneasy politeness. Lady Beatrice sat at the head of the table, pale but composed. Beside her was Mr. Oswald Price, the family solicitor, whose careful smile never reached his eyes. Dr. Marlowe, old friend of the family, held his wine glass without drinking. Clara Vale's son, Daniel, recently returned from the continent, sat silent and severe. And at the far end, Mrs. Hobb, the housekeeper, moved quietly through the lamplight, her face lined by years of service and secrecy. Wren observed them all. "Strange," Price said lightly, "to reopen sorrow when justice has already been done." "Justice," Wren replied, "is sometimes only a word placed over convenience." No one spoke after that. At midnight, the nursery bell rang again. It was a thin sound, frail as a memory, yet it moved through the manor with terrible clarity. Beatrice rose, her hand at her throat. Dr. Marlowe dropped his napkin. Daniel stood so quickly his chair struck the carpet. Wren did not move at once. He listened. The bell rang once more. Then silence. They found the nursery door open, though Beatrice swore it had been locked. The room beyond was cold. Rain whispered at the balcony doors. The old cradle stood beneath a dust sheet. Near the hearth lay a single white glove, damp at the fingertips. On the wall, written in ash, were 4 words. "Ask who rang first." Mrs. Hobb began to weep. Wren picked up the glove and held it near the lamp. It was not old, nor theatrical in the same fashion as Clara's tricks. It bore a faint scent of camphor and ink. "Someone," he said softly, "has grown impatient with silence." The next morning, Kingsford Manor lay beneath a gray sky. Rain dripped steadily from the gutters. The gardens looked blurred, as though the house itself were dissolving into the weather. Wren began in the nursery. The bell cord, supposedly repaired by Clara, had been cut and retied more than once. Behind the wall, a narrow servant's passage led downward toward the back stairs. Dust lay thick there, except in one place where a sleeve had brushed the stone clean. In Sir Edmund's old bedroom, Wren found a locked medicine cabinet. Dr. Marlowe opened it with reluctance. Inside were tonics, powders, sleeping drops, and an empty space where one bottle had clearly stood for years. "Digitalis," said the doctor quietly, "for Sir Edmund's heart. Missing since his death." Wren said nothing. In the library, Mr. Price produced Clara Vale's confession. It was brief, elegant, and too perfectly phrased. "She wrote this?" Wren asked. "She signed it." "That was not my question." Price's smile faded. By afternoon, Wren had requested Clara Vale be brought from the village infirmary, where she had been kept in frail health since her imprisonment was delayed. She arrived wrapped in a dark shawl, her face pale, her eyes still carrying the ghost of the woman she had once been. When she saw Daniel, she nearly broke. "My son," she whispered. "He did not go to her." Wren spoke gently. "Miss Vale, did you kill Sir Edmund?" Clara closed her eyes. "I wanted him afraid. I wanted him to remember Alina. I rang the bell. I placed the slipper. I wrote the message." "But the poison." Her lips trembled. "I found him dying." The room grew still. "He had already drunk," Clara said. "He looked at me as if he had expected someone else. He said, 'Not her, I was wrong.' Then he asked me to save the boy." Daniel stared at her. "What boy?" Clara looked toward Beatrice. "Not you," Wren said softly. "Sir Edmund meant Daniel." At that, Price moved toward the door. Wren's voice stopped him. "Stay, Mr. Price. The story is nearly finished." That evening, he gathered them in the nursery. Rain tapped the balcony glass. A small fire had been lit, and its glow moved over the cradle, the faded wallpaper, the portrait of Alina brought up from below. The room felt less haunted now, but no less watchful. 30 years ago," Wren began, "Lady Alina did not fall by accident. Sir Edmund struck her in anger. Clara knew part of it. Dr. Marlowe suspected. Mrs. Hobb heard enough to spend 3 decades afraid. The housekeeper bowed her head. Sir Edmund intended to confess, Wren continued, but not only to Aliner's death. He intended to acknowledge Daniel as his son and leave him a portion of the estate. Daniel's face tightened. I knew nothing of this. No, but Mr. Price did. The solicitor gave a quiet laugh. Absurd. You drafted the new will. You also managed the old estate debts. If Daniel inherited, your theft would be discovered. Sir Edmund feared Clara because of her grief, but the person he should have feared was the one holding his papers. Wren lifted the white glove. Last night, you rang the bell again to frighten Miss Vale into silence and to convince us Clara's confession was true. But the glove carried ink from your desk and camphor from the drawer where you keep your legal seals. Price's face emptied of warmth. The poison, Wren said, was not in the cordial Clara prepared. It was in Sir Edmund's heart medicine, altered days before. Clara gave herself up because she believed her old vengeance had killed him. You allowed that belief to become your alibi. For a long moment, only the rain spoke. Then Dr. Marlowe reached into his coat and placed a small bottle on the nursery table. I found this in Price's case, he said. I was afraid to speak before. Price looked at them all, and at last his politeness deserted him. He was a foolish old man, he said. He would have ruined everything for guilt. No, said Wren quietly. He was late to truth. That is not the same as foolish. By dawn, the rain had stopped. Police wheels rolled away from Kingsford Manor, leaving dark lines through the wet gravel. Clara Vale sat beside the nursery fire, Daniel standing near her at last, uncertain but no longer distant. Beatrice opened the balcony doors, and clean morning air entered the room where so much sorrow had been kept. Detective Wren paused beneath Aliner's portrait before leaving. Her painted eyes seemed softer in the gray light. Perhaps nothing had changed in the portrait. Perhaps only the house had changed around it. Kingsford Manor would never be innocent. But it was no longer lying. And sometimes, in an old house filled with rain, firelight, and remembered voices, that is as close to peace as the living can offer the dead. Chapter 10. Dawn over Kingsford Manor. Dawn came slowly to Kingsford Manor, as though the night had been reluctant to release its hold. The rain that had troubled the house for 2 days had finally passed, leaving the garden silvered with mist and the gravel drive dark with wetness. Water clung to the ivy on the walls. It trembled from the bare branches of the elms. Beyond the lawns, the low hills slept beneath a veil of pale blue morning, and the first light touched the windows one by one, gentle as a hand placed upon a fevered brow. Inside, the manor was quiet. Not peaceful, not yet. Only quiet. In the nursery, the fire had burned down to a bed of red embers. Its fading warmth softened the room where the truth had spent 30 years waiting behind dust sheets, locked doors, and polite grief. The old cradle stood near the hearth. The balcony doors remained open, and the cold morning air moved through the curtains with a soft, breathing sound. Detective Alistair Wren stood beside the window, his hands folded behind his back, watching dawn gather over the wet gardens. Behind him, Lady Beatrice Kingsford sat in a chair beneath her mother's portrait. She had not slept. Her face was pale, but the dreadful stillness that had lived in her eyes since childhood had begun, almost invisibly, to loosen. Clara Vale sat near the fire, wrapped in a shawl. Her son Daniel stood beside her, not touching her, but no longer turned away. That small distance, Wren thought, held years of pain, and yet also the fragile beginning of mercy. The house feels different, Beatrice said softly. Wren did not turn. Houses often do when people stop asking them to lie. Outside, a rook called once from the wet trees. The sound seemed too ordinary for such a morning. Below stairs, the constables had finished their work. Mr. Oswald Price, solicitor and keeper of so many false arrangements, had been taken away before sunrise. He had gone without protest, his composure restored like a coat buttoned carefully over ruin. Only at the doorway had he looked back, not at the nursery, not at the portrait of Aliner Kingsford, but at the library where ledgers, wills, and forged accounts had once served him better than loyalty. He had killed Sir Edmund quietly, patiently, with poison hidden in medicine, then allowed Clara Vale's old guilt to carry the shape of his crime. It was elegant in its way. And cruel. Dr. Marlowe entered the nursery with a cup of tea in both hands. He gave one to Clara and one to Beatrice, then stood aside, uncertain where sorrow should place itself. "I should have spoken years ago," he said. No one answered at once. The morning light grew stronger. It touched the floorboards, the cradle, the faded wallpaper where little birds had once been painted for a child who learned too early that silence could be inherited. Clara looked into the fire. "We all should have spoken," she said. "But fear has a patient voice. It tells you tomorrow will be easier." Daniel's face tightened. "You let me grow up without knowing who I was." Clara closed her eyes. "I thought I was protecting you. From him. From the world he belonged to." Wren turned then, not sharply, but with a quiet attention that made even grief speak carefully. "And yet the world found him anyway." Daniel looked toward the portrait of Alina. "Did Sir Edmund truly mean to acknowledge me?" "Yes," Wren said, "late imperfectly, but yes." The young man absorbed this in silence. Outside, sunlight slipped through the mist and lay across the wet grass like pale silk. Lady Beatrice rose and walked to the balcony. For a moment, she stood where her mother had stood on the night that became a family legend, a warning, a wound dressed up as tragedy. The stone railing beyond was dark with rain. Far below, the garden path curved toward the yew hedge, where droplets flashed in the first light. "I used to dream she walked out there," Beatrice said. "Not falling, walking, as if she had simply left the house and chosen never to return." Clara's voice was almost a whisper. "I wish she had." "So do I." There was no accusation in it. That made it more painful. Wren watched them both. In his profession, he had seen murderers, victims, liars, and saints made falsely of ordinary people. But this room contained something more complicated. Those who had harmed, those who had failed to prevent harm, and those who had lived inside consequences they did not understand. A maid entered quietly to say that Mrs. Hobb was waiting below. Beatrice nodded. "Ask her to come up." The old housekeeper appeared moments later, carrying a small wooden box. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were clear. "I kept these," she said. "Her ladyship's things. I had no right, perhaps." She placed the box on the nursery table. Inside lay a lace handkerchief, a child's silver rattle, a pressed white rose, and a folded ribbon the color of rain clouds. At the bottom was a letter addressed to Beatrice, never delivered. Beatrice touched it but did not open it. "Why now?" she asked. Mrs. Hobb swallowed. "Because I was afraid while the dead were being blamed. I am more afraid now of continuing to be a coward." Wren gave the smallest nod, as if acknowledging a difficult truth properly paid for. Downstairs, the manor began to wake. A fire was laid in the breakfast room. Footsteps passed through corridors where only hours before everyone had moved as if the walls were listening. The servants opened curtains. Pale daylight entered rooms that had long preferred lamplight. Dust shone in the air. Rainwater tapped from gutters in slow, patient drops. By 8 o'clock, Beatrice asked everyone to gather in the library. It was the room where Sir Edmund had guarded his papers, where Price had smiled over documents that disguised theft, where Wren had read the sentence that reopened the dead man's fear. "Clara is not the one I fear." Now the curtains were drawn back. The fire burned cleanly. Beatrice stood beside her father's desk, Alina's unopened letter in her hand. "Kingsford Manor has belonged to men who believed confession was weakness," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it did not break. "I will not continue that tradition." She looked at Daniel. "My father intended to provide for you. I will honor that." Daniel began to speak, but she lifted a hand gently. "Not as charity, not as guilt, as truth." Clara wept then, silently, her hand pressed to her mouth. Dr. Marlowe turned toward the window. Wren looked at the bookshelves, the polished floor, the portrait of Sir Edmund above the mantel. The old man's painted face remained stern and dignified. Yet in the morning light, dignity seemed a fragile thing beside honesty. At last, Beatrice opened her mother's letter. She read it alone. No one asked what it said. Some truths belong first to the wounded, before they are offered to the world. When she finished, she folded the pages carefully and placed them near her heart. Then she walked to the hearth and stood for a long while in the golden warmth. "The nursery will be changed," she said. "Not hidden, changed." "Into what?" Daniel asked. Beatrice looked toward the brightening window. A room for children who are told the truth. No one smiled, but the silence softened. Detective Wren left Kingsford Manor shortly after breakfast. The sky had cleared to a pale, delicate blue. The rain had washed the stones clean, and every leafless branch shone with water. Behind him, the manor stood calm in the morning light, no longer innocent, but less burdened by its beauty. At the gate, Wren paused and looked back. From an upstairs window, a curtain moved. Perhaps Beatrice, perhaps Clara, perhaps only the house exhaling after too many years of holding its breath. He opened his umbrella, though the rain had stopped, and walked down the wet road toward the waiting carriage. Behind him, dawn settled fully over Kingsford Manor. Not as forgiveness, not quite, but as the first honest light after a very long night.